What's up, Shabbat Shalom, Virtual House Church family, and everybody watching. This is so exciting to join together with you guys on Shabbat and get to go through the Word. This is the Virtual House Church. I am your host this week, Jake Grant, but we are also going to be joined by our bro, Juan Carlos. He's still dealing with a little bit of a throat scratch, but he's going to be able to join us for this show today, so I'm really excited to have Juan Carlos back on the Virtual House Church. Now, the Virtual House Church, for those of you who don't know, is kind of the love project set up by Rob Skiba that he kept going for many years, going through the cyclical Torah portions, Genesis through Exodus, and studied many times through those portions year by year. I was fortunate enough to get to join up with Rob back in 2017 and participated with Virtual House Church since those early days when I first started getting online. And upon Rob's passing last year, under Sheila's blessing, Juan Carlos and I are continuing on the Virtual House Church. And one of Rob's things that he wanted us to continue on was to move past just the traditional Torah portion cycle, the first 5 books, and to move into the other texts of Scripture, the writings, the prophets, looking into more of the New Testament. And currently, our current study is in 2 Samuel. And now last week, I had a short pre-recorded show that covered the 2 Samuel portion of David and his heart's desire to want to establish a presence, a temple of the Most High where he lived. And we have the beautiful prayer there and that discussion. And this week, we are going to be going into 2 Samuel 8 to 10, chapter 8 through 10. And before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and share with you guys, like we always do, the Virtual House Church website. So let me just pop this on screen real quick. So this is the Virtual House Church website now. It's not as up to date as I had hoped to have it. We're still working on, I'm still figuring out some stuff with WordPress and I haven't been able to update it. So just kind of ignore the this week's study page. I haven't updated it since back when we were in Joshua studies, but or first Samuel a little bit. But please just send that, because there's a lot of other really great resources. You can find all about why Rob started the Virtual House Church. You can look at the Virtual House Church store, which has some calendars. It also has the Torah portion workbooks for the traditional Torah portion. I believe right now the cycle that the vast majority of people are going through in their home groups, their Sabbath fellowships, is in the book of Numbers. So if you want to check that out, another good resource is Torah Portions. You just type it into Google and go to torahportions.ffoz.org. And this is generally what most people are on during the cyclical Torah portion study. I know my buddy over at Parable of the Vineyard, Adam, he usually is like 1 week behind, but we won't fault him for it. But anyways, we're just usually all trying to study the Scriptures together. Jumping around here. We're all studying the Scriptures together. And I just popped on Juan Carlos there for a second, so I'm going to go ahead and let Juan Carlos say hey before we carry on. What's up, Juan?
Hey, Jake. Thank you so much. Shalom, brother.
Shabbat
So it's
Shalom.
nice to be back, after so many weeks without being with you here. Thank you so much for taking the post. I have been telling you, and I got this sick very severely. I got this severe flu, put me to bed for a few days, also to my wife. But thanks to Yahuwah that we are getting better. I still have some issues with my throat and nasal congestion, but a little bit. And it's good that Yahuwah is also always listening to our prayers. Thank you so much for all of you that have been praying for me and for my wife. Yahuwah is also always listening to our voice, and he's the one providing healing and strong to our bodies. So thank you so much. And it's a blessing to be back, Jake, with you here.
Great to see you again, Juan. I'm so glad to have you back. While we were setting up this week's Virtual House Church, I was running a little bit behind. I was like, oh no, I'm not going to be able to have it done up and ready right at 2:00. And so I jump on here, and Juan had already had it all set up and ready. So it just really appreciate you, Juan, and it's great to have you back. We've missed you a lot.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna just share a few more things here. The Virtual House Church website was one of the big last kind of love gifts, love services of Rob Skiba, and he spent a ton of time working on this new website, updating the old website, transitioning everything over, and a lot of really good segments here that you can check out, such as the Defending Messiah portion, Coming Out of Babylon. This is really great for people who are just discovering this concept of full Bible observance, right? Like, why is a Christian in the modern world, in a Western nation, or somebody who's not necessarily Jewish, interested in keeping the Torah? Well, this Coming Out of Babylon section has a lot of back to basics to understanding why are we serving God the way we are? Why do we keep Sabbath? Why are we trying to keep the feasts and the different various jots and tittles of the Torah? Isn't that stuff done away with? Well, take another second look at that, because there's some really interesting aspects that we're realizing that sometimes the Apostle Paul's writings can be twisted to the error of lawlessness, as 2 Peter 3, the end of chapter 3, warns. And so there's a lot of great resources here for people that are kind of like, well, this is a really confusing topic. Doesn't Paul talk about the law being done away with? And why would anybody want to keep Sabbath? Isn't that kind of like bondage to rest? Well, I beg to differ, just based on my own personal application. It's a blessing to start to restore these commandments to our walk. It's a blessing to be able to realize the character, the nature of Elohim, and as we apply His commandments to our walk, we learn more about Yeshua, more how to be like Christ, more about how we can apply these commandments to be set apart, and to realize that these are instructions for living, for righteousness, that He lovingly gave His people. And unfortunately, Satan, the enemy of our souls, has come to steal, kill, and destroy, and to hide a lot of things that have a tremendous beauty and value to them. And so we're coming out of Babylon, we're coming out of denominationalism and all the confusion of doctrinal spellcraft and all that kind of stuff, and we're trying to apply the Word of God in a holistic, balanced way, while still holding on to our Messiah, Yeshua. Because in the book of Revelation, remember, it's the dragon comes to make war with those who keep the testimony of Yeshua and keep the commandments of Elohim. So while we're going to continue on, I'm going to go ahead and say a prayer for our Virtual House Church gathering today. Thank you, everybody who's joined us and has been joining us live. Today, we have some songs we've started to gather to be played during Virtual House Church. Last week, I got a premiere Good Shepherd by Lyndon and Ruth of Left and Right Ministries, and I'm going to play it again today. They was dedicated to Rob, and a really good worship song. And I might play another short worship song from my sister-in-law, Felicia, who graciously made some for us to play. And then we're going to get into the study. We're going to go ahead and read through 2 Samuel 8, and then we're going to have some discussion with Juan Carlos. So before we get into it, let's just say a prayer to the Most High on this Shabbat, and a blessing for the Virtual House Church community. So, Abba, Father, I come before you, and I thank you for who you are, Father. Thank you, Creator of the heavens and earth, that sought to call out people that were otherwise blind to the value and the importance of your word, Father. Thank you for revealing to us that belief in your Son and His example, and walking after the path, and emulating our Messiah is such a beautiful walk to then try to apply to our life, Father. Thank you that you loved us enough to send your only begotten Son, so that we would not perish, but that we would have everlasting life. And Father, help us be pleasing before your sight. Help us repent of those sins and those idols that we set up in our hearts, to clean up house and to be more pleasing to you, to follow after you with all of our heart, all of our mind, and all of our strength. And now, Father, I ask that you please bless this Torah portion study, and bless Shabbat and all the households that are keeping it, resting and studying and setting this day apart in whatever way they are choosing to do it. Father, I ask that you bless this time, and you give us shalom and peace and wholeness, which is one of the meanings of shalom. Father, give us wholeness. And I pray this in Yeshua's name. Amen. All right, so let's go ahead and play some music, kicking off the Virtual House Church with Good Shepherd by Left and Right Ministries. You guys can check them out on YouTube, and it's a great song. Here we go.
For he's our good shepherd, for he looks after all the broken and bruised, all the lost and confused, and he calls us by name, and he washes away all our sins, so we bow and surrender to our good shepherd. We are all lost sometimes, and we've all failed to find joy that is found in Yeshua. But he will come after to where you wander. He will call you back to him and give you peace. Oh, he'll give you peace. For he's our good shepherd, for he looks after all the broken and bruised, all the lost and confused, and he calls us by name, and he washes away all our sins, so we bow and surrender to our good shepherd. Oh, he's our good shepherd. Oh, we may lose a few of those we love and knew, and our hearts may be broken, but he is still working, and this life is a journey, and in the midst of our hurting, he is giving us his love and his mercy. Oh, he's giving us mercy, for he's our good shepherd, for he looks after all the broken and bruised, all the lost and confused, and he calls us by name, and he washes away all our sins, so we bow and surrender to our good shepherd. Oh, he's our good shepherd. Oh, he keeps to his sheep, and he tends to the weak. He leaves the 99 to seek the one who's hard to find, and he calls us his chosen, and he blesses the broken by giving us his grace. Now we follow his ways. He keeps to his sheep, and he tends to the weak. Oh, he leaves the 99 to seek the one who's hard to find, and he calls us his chosen, and he blesses the broken by giving us his grace. Now we follow his way. Oh, he's our good shepherd, for he looks after all the broken and bruised, all the lost and confused, and he calls us by name, and he washes away all our sins, so bow and surrender to our good shepherd. He's our good shepherd. For he's our good shepherd, for he looks after all the broken, bruised, all the lost and confused, and he calls us by name, and he washes away all our sins, so we bow and surrender to our good shepherd.
Wow, what a beautiful song. I really appreciate those guys. That was Left and Right Ministries, if you guys are interested in checking them out further. All right, so let us check out this week's 2 Samuel Torah portion that Juan Carlos has set up for us. Just so you guys have a little forecast here, these are the coming studies. If you wanted to do a little study and add some comments in the chat, I'm trying to pay attention to the chat. So if you have any insight, any thoughts as we read through this portion that you'd like to add to the discussion, please feel free to add it to the live chat for those of you who are joining us live. So, of course, last week was I shall raise up your seed, tied to the time of David having a desire to build the temple. And this week is chapters 8 through 10. And the name in English is He Shall Eat at My Table. And I will try here in the Hebrew, Akel al Shakani. Juan Carlos will have to assist me in the pronunciation a little bit. But and also we have the forthcoming studies there. But let's go ahead and read through together 2 Samuel chapter 8 through chapter 10. And then I'll bring Juan Carlos on and we can have some discussion. And please, while we're reading, if you have any insightful comments or if you have any questions regarding what we're talking about or any scriptures that you feel are relevant or connected to what our study is today, please add them in the chat and we can kind of all contribute to this study. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started reading 2 Samuel chapter 8. And after this, it came to pass that David smote the Philistines and subdued them. And David took Methegama out of the hand of the Philistines, and he smote Moab and measured them with a line, casting them down to the ground. Even with 2 lines measured he to put to death, and with 1 full line to keep alive. And so the Moabites became David's servants and brought gifts. David smote also Hadadezer, the son of Rahab, king of Zobah, as he went to recover his border at the river Euphrates. And David took from him 1,000 chariots and 700 horsemen and 20,000 footmen. And David houghed all the chariot horses, but reserved of them for 100 chariots. And when the Syrians of Damascus came to succor Hadadezer, king of Zobah, David slew of the Syrians 22,000 men. Then David put garrisons in Syria of Damascus, and the Syrians became servants to David and brought gifts. And the Lord preserved David whithersoever he went. And David took the shields of gold that were on the servants of Hadadezer, and brought them to Jerusalem. And from Betah and from Berthai, cities of Hadadezer, King David took exceeding much brass. When Toi, king of Hamath, heard that David had smitten all the host of Hadadezer, then Toi sent Joram his son unto King David to salute him and to bless him, because he had fought against Hadadezer and smitten him. For Hadadezer had wars with Toi, and Joram brought with him vessels of silver and vessels of gold and vessels of brass, which also King David did dedicate, which also King David did dedicate unto the Lord with the silver and gold that he had dedicated of all nations which he subdued. Of Syria and of Moab and of the children of Ammon and of the Philistines and of Amalek and of the spoil of Hadadezer, son of Rahab, king of Zobah. And David gat him a name when he returned from smiting of the Syrians in the valley of Salt, being 18,000 men. And he put garrisons in Edom. Throughout all Edom put he garrisons, and all they of Edom became David's servants. And the Lord preserved David whithersoever he went. And David reigned over all Israel, and David executed judgment and justice unto all his people. And Joab the son of Zeruiah was over the host, and Jehoshaphat the son of Ahilud was recorder. And Zadok the son of Ahitub and Ahimelech son of Abiathar were the priests, and Zariah was the scribe. And Benaniah the son of Jehoiada was over both the Cherethites and the Pelethites, and David's sons were chief rulers. Chapter 9. And David said, Is there yet any that is left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? And there was of the house of Saul a servant whose name was Ziba. And when they had called him unto David, the king said unto him, Art thou Ziba? And he said, Thy servant is he. And the king said, Is there not yet any of the house of Saul, that I may show the kindness of God unto him? And Ziba said unto the king, Jonathan hath yet a son, which is lame on his feet. And the king said unto him, Where is he? And Ziba said unto the king, Behold, he is in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel of Lodbar. Then King David sent and fetched him out of the house of Machir, the son of Amiel from Lodbar. Now when Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, has come unto David, he fell on his face and did reverence. And David said, Mephibosheth. And he answered, Behold, thy servant. And David said unto him, Fear not, for I will surely show thee kindness for Jonathan thy father's sake, and will restore thee all the land of Saul thy father, and thou shalt eat bread at my table continually. And he bowed himself and said, What is thy servant, that thou shouldest look upon such a dead dog as I am? Then the king called to Ziba, Saul's servant, and said unto him, I have given unto thy master's son all that pertained to Saul, and to all his house. Thou therefore and thy sons and thy servants shall till the land for him, and thou shalt bring in the fruits, that thy master's son may have food to eat. But Mephibosheth, thy master's son, shall eat bread always at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Wow. Then Ziba said Ziba unto the king, According to all that my lord the king hath commanded his servant, so shall thy servant do. As for Mephibosheth, said the king, he shall eat at my table as one of the king's sons. And Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah, and all that dwelled in the house of Ziba were servants unto Mephibosheth. So Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem, for he did eat continually at the king's table, and was lame on both of his feet. 2 Samuel chapter 10. And it came to pass after this, that the king of the children of Ammon died, and Hanun his son reigned in his stead. Then said David, I will show kindness unto Hanun the son of Nahash, as his father showed kindness unto me. And David sent to comfort him by the hand of his servant for his father. And David's servants came into the land of the children of Ammon. And the princes of the children of Ammon said unto Hanun their lord, Thinkest thou that David doth honor thy father, that he hath sent comforters unto thee? Hath not David rather sent his servants unto thee to search the city and to spy it out, and to overthrow it? Wherefore Hanun took David's servants and shaved off the one half of their beards, and cut off their garments in the middle, even to the buttocks, and sent them away. And when they had told it to David, he sent to meet them, and because the men were greatly ashamed, and the king said, Tarry at Jericho until your beards be grown, and then return. And when the children of Ammon saw that they stank before David, the children of Ammon sent and hired the Syrian of Beth-Rehob and the Syrians of Zobah 20,000 footmen, of King Maacah 1,000 men, and of Ishtab 12,000 men. And when David heard of it, he sent Joab and all the host of the mighty men. And the children of Ammon came out and put the battle in array at the entering in of the gate. And the Syrians of Zobah and of Rehob and Iftab and Maacah were by themselves in the field. And when Joab saw that the front of the battle was against him before and behind, he chose of all the choice men of Israel and put them in array against the Syrians. And the rest of the people had delivered into the hand of Abishai his brother, that he might put them in array against the children of Ammon. And he said, if the Syrians be too strong for me, then thou shalt help me. But if the children of Ammon be too strong for thee, then I will come and help thee. Be of good courage, and let us play the men for our people and for the cities of our God, and the Yahuwah do that which seemeth him good. And Joab drew nigh, and the people that were with him, into the battle against the Syrians, and they fled before him. And when the children of Ammon saw the Syrians were fled, then fled also before Abishai, and entered into the city. So Joab returned from the children of Ammon, and came to Jerusalem. Here, I just got to check here. I'm to 10:19. Okay. And Hadrezer sent and brought out the Syrians that were beyond the river, and they came to Helam. And Shobach, the captain of the host of Hadrezer, went before them. And when it was told David, he gathered all Israel together and passed over Jordan and came to Helam. And the Syrians set themselves in array against David and fought with him. The Syrians fled before Israel, and David slew the men of 700 chariots of the Syrians, 40,000 horsemen, and smote Shobach, the captain of their host, who died there. And when all the kings that were servants to Hadrezer saw that they were smitten before Israel, they made peace with Israel and served them. So the Syrians feared to help the children of Ammon anymore. Alrighty, so let's jump back on here, and we're going to add Juan Carlos back to the stream. And if you guys have any comments or insights as we're studying through this, please feel free again to share. And let's get into some discussion about what we just read through.
Very
All
good.
right.
So I think there are multiple things here that are interesting. You know, I was when I was taking a look early today in this portion. In the overall, it looks very prophetic to me, because we see the unification of the kingdom. We see the desire of David in the previous portion to build a temple for Yahweh. And now we see that after they have this amazing time of peace, that we have these wars coming. It's like, like what's going to happen at the end. And what took my attention as well is what happened in the chapter 9, is that also for me, this is very prophetic. But before going into the details, Jake, there's something that caught my attention, and maybe we can discuss about it. What is written in the chapter 8 at the beginning? Because it says that David went to fight with the Philistines, but and he struck them. But what caught my attention is what is written in the verse 2. It says, he also struck Moab and measured them off with a line, causing them to lie down on the earth. With 2 lines, he measured off those to be put to death, and with 1 complete line, those to be kept alive. So, when I was reading this and I was part of the discussion here at home, it's kind of weird how it's written. He selected and he put the people on the ground, and he was measuring them. And, the first thing that came to my mind when I was reading this is that the one that he decided to put to death were the one that was more taller. Maybe I'm reading it wrong, but that was the first impression that I got when I was reading this. Because those ones that were measuring 2 lines, he decided to put to death. But the ones that were measuring only 1 line, he kept them alive. So what is that for me? So anyone that was taller than certain stature, he was considering that they didn't deserve to keep living. So are we talking about giants here? Are we talking about Nephilim, descendants of the Nephilim? What do you think?
That's exactly what I was going to start talking about. So you beat me to the chase. What an interesting exchange there of those. I think, likely they were weeding out the giants. I mean, I know height supremacy is something that might be applied here. That the shorter Israelites kind of having a pre-existing angst against anybody who had tall stature, whether they were Nephilim or not, I don't know. But it definitely maybe was a way to protect Israel from men of strength and like fierce men. So like all the short guys, you're good to go. You're not going to hurt us too bad. But if one of these big guys starts to come against us, that'll be an issue. So we got to take care of them here.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's such an. I've never noticed this passage before. Reading through 2 Samuel about how he was like weeding the giants out is really what it makes me think of.
That was my impression as well. And when we think about who Moab is, there is not that clear information that about giants coming from that descendants. But we know from what the relationship Moab came is what happened with Lot and his daughters. So could it be? And I remember Rob was talking about a lot about this, about what could be in the DNA, what could happen in terms of sin and the connection with DNA. That maybe that's why David got this thing in his heart, and he knew about the story, and he knew that this could happen. I'm just speculating, but it's nice to this speculation considering what is written over there. That's why maybe he was guided to eliminate those ones that maybe had this DNA corruption. Just thinking out loud.
Yeah, so what I was going to add to this very topic you're bringing out at the start of chapter 8 was you started off saying that there are some very interesting parallels with the unification of the tribes under King
Correct.
David and the coming unification of all the earth and the scattered tribes of Israel under Yeshua as during the second coming, during the millennial reign. And there's some prophetic verses that I want to read in Ezekiel chapter 20 that parallels the weeding out of the giants, the corrupted, in this passage with the plumb line, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and jump down here, and we are going to read, I believe it's Ezekiel chapter 20. And I'm just trying to recall my it's 2037 was the verse. Okay, so we're going to start a little bit earlier, and I'll share my screen so you guys can read along with me. So we'll start back here, Ezekiel chapter 20. We'll start here in verses 33. And it says, "As I live, saith Yahuwah Elohim, surely with a mighty hand and with a stretched out arm, with fury poured out, I will rule over you." This is what David is doing in the context of 2 Samuel. He is now ruling over all unified Israel. And it says, "And I will bring you out from the people and will gather you out of the countries wherein you are scattered with a mighty hand and with a stretched out arm, with fury poured out. And I will bring you into the wilderness of the people, and there I will plead with you face to face. Like I pleaded with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt, so will I plead with you, saith Yahuwah Elohim. And I will cause you to pass under the rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant." So this is the verse that I'm paralleling with this same event here as David unifies Israel and starts to rule over them and starts to pass some people under the rod. Wow. It says then, "And I will purge out from among you the rebels and them that transgress against me, and I will bring them forth out of the country where they sojourn. They shall not enter into the land of Israel, and you shall know that I am Yahuwah." So anyways, I wanted to point out this parallel to what we're studying through here with the measuring line, right? And to see who made it and who didn't is so interesting. The reflection of the rule of David as he begins to rule over all of Israel, and even the things that he does. It's not just him being king, it's also the actions that he takes. And so as we start to continue on into this discussion of David, and we're going to get into these next few chapters, such as him bringing the beloved, son, the crippled son, to be at his banquet table, right? And all of these have amazing parallels with scripture that we can
Parallels.
continue on to. But anyways, that was my point there in Ezekiel 20 in relation to chapter 8.
And actually, it's very interesting, Jake, because we always talk about being measured spiritually, but in this case, we are seeing something physically happening. So that's why I got this connection that is really interesting. I totally agree, with this what you shared in Ezekiel. I think this is something that really important, exactly what Yahushua will do. But when we talk about spiritually, also we are going to be measured. And I think we are continually being measured. What is our actions? What is our beliefs? If we really are walking in the way or not. And this is kind of our King being measuring us in a day-to-day basis. That's why we need to make sure that we are walking in the right path. And you're absolutely right. What's coming in the next verses, in the next chapter is quite amazing. And you know what caught my attention as well in chapter 8 is that when we connect with the previous chapter, the chapter 7, is that we see the faithfulness of Yahuwah. David went to conquer all these people around Israel, and Yahuwah was with him because of the promise. When we were reading the chapter 7, we see that Yahuwah promised that he was going to establish his throne, the throne of David, forever. And what we see here, basically, from my point of view, in chapter 8, is Yahuwah being faithful to the promise and helping David in order to establish his throne. We see the Assyrians over there you were reading, that in the chapter 10, they were fighting against David. And we know that the Assyrian is also a prophetic implication of what's coming in the future. And not only that, we know that was the Assyrians, the one taking out the 10 tribes of Israel, the kingdom of the north, out of the land. So we see here David representing Mashiach, taking the from the power of it that is coming from Yahuwah, taking the promise in order to establish the kingdom. And that's for me is amazing. It's amazing, just especially when we connect to what's coming, and how we should be believing and putting our hope in Mashiach, especially with the craziness going on in the world.
Yeah, it makes me think about how, in relation to kind of like the measuring topic we've been talking about, and the weeding out of the rebels is a lot of these people that came against David. And also, you could kind of make a correlation between those who stand tall are those who are rebelling, or those who are prideful.
Absolutely.
And those who are lowly, right? Those who are humble, the meek shall inherit the earth. Those who don't, try to point their finger at, at the Messiah when he comes back to set everything right. Instead, they're like, please, have mercy, and so maybe that's an aspect to it is, there's a parallel with not only those who are shown mercy. There's several instances of the different people that are allowed to survive and live. So you have first the separation of the tall people from the short people, right? But then that carries on to these subsequent wars and battles of the people who refused to submit and stood up to buck the Messiah. And so it just reminds me of the layered judgments in the end times, as the sheep are taken and set aside, then the goats are separated, then the people that are totally against him come to make war with him. Like the series of events is just interesting to me as we're reading it.
Yeah, and there is another aspect that I saw that is also interesting, especially in our day-to-day walk, Jake, is that the faithfulness is going in the two ways. It's faithfulness of Yahuwah helping David to establish his throne, as we see in the chapter 9, but also the faithfulness of David toward Elohim. And why I'm saying this is that we see what is written in this chapter 9 is that David was fighting with all these people around Israel, around the land. And what he was doing, as soon as he was conquering them, and he was getting all the spoil, he was setting apart this with one purpose. And we know what's the purpose. Maybe he didn't use it himself, but he was storing all of this with the purpose to build the house of Yahuwah. So faithfulness is going in the two directions. Faithfulness that Yahuwah toward his people, but also his people needs to be faithful to Yahuwah. And I'm wondering, and this is speaking to me, to all of us, that the blessings from Yahuwah are in a day-to-day basis. Sometimes we don't see it, but the only fact that we are healthy, the only fact that we are alive, the only fact that we are having a family and we have a house, those are part of the blessings from Yahuwah. So I think we need to ask ourselves in a day-to-day basis, are we being faithful to Yahuwah? Are we blessing him in the same way that he's blessing us? Because exactly what David did in this passage is to be faithful to the promise of Yahuwah, the promise he made that he wanted to build a house for Yahuwah. So I think it is also important that we need to keep in mind is in the two directions. We need to bless Yahuwah in the same way that he's blessing us.
Yes. Yep. I had a couple things in the chat that maybe we can address before moving on to some of our next points. I had some interesting things here. Somebody was asking, did Samuel misjudge who was to be anointed king? I guess whenever he chose Saul. I don't know if you have any thoughts. My just first impression is just, well, Saul was still selected out of all of the tribes through the casting of lots. Believe it or not, there was a system where they heard the will of the Most High by drawing. I don't even know how the lots were conducted, but he was the tribes were selected, and then from the tribes, the household of his father was selected, and then of his father, he was selected, and he was found hiding among the baggage, is what the scriptures say. So Samuel, in a way, even though he had that prophetic moment and told Saul that he was going to be king, the Elohim still identified him as the choice in front of all the people, even though he rebelled later on.
I agree with you, Jake. Yeah, yes, I agree. And I see here in the chat, Shirion mentioned something very important. Yahuwah makes no mistakes. And that's absolutely true. And I think, and we discussed this in the past, it was the Yahuwah, the one guiding the Shmuel to define who's going to be the first king. And my take on this is that this needed to happen because who was the one asking for a king? It was the people. It was not the Yahuwah deciding to establish a king. It was a change in the way to govern Israel. Before was the rulers, the judges, but the people started to ask for a king because they wanted to be like the other nations. So I think they need to go through the kingship of Shaul in order for Yahuwah later on to establish David, a man after his own heart. And we can go in this rabbit hole for a lot of details because it's so amazing when we see about what's happening with David, because the only purpose that the Yahuwah decided to establish David is because of the plan of salvation. And it is written so amazingly in the chapter 7 is that through David we have Mashiach. And Mashiach, when we connect to Yahuwah and the entire kingdom of heaven, we see the amazing picture of what Yahuwah is intended to do. And what it is to go back to the very beginning, what was the very beginning of the creation. So short answer, no, I think that needed to happen. Shaul needed to be part of the kings of Israel.
Yeah, it's like the question is, why didn't he just skip over Saul and put David right at the beginning? Why was Saul in the first place? And I think a partial answer to that is he is using what is it? Second Timothy talks about, or no, maybe it's, but the scriptures are given as an example for us.
Yep.
And so the reason that the story of Saul being a preceding king to the anointed King David, who loved Elohim and is a foreshadow of the coming Mashiach, is there's also an interesting parallel there with King Saul, and even a coming Antichrist figure, who is then followed by King David, the coming Savior, Mashiach, king. So there's an interesting parallel there as well of the one who rebelled, the rebellious one, and the obedient servant, right? And so it kind of reveals to us some interesting prophetic elements as well when you look at the layering of the king Saul first, the failure, the rebellious one, the one who conjured up spirits and spoke to witches, and then of course David, the obedient servant.
And I think you made a great point, Jake. I have been always thinking on this way. The scripture is an example for us, and it is written in the book of Revelation that we need to be careful of not losing our crown. And for me, the perfect example of how to lose our crown is exactly what happened with Saul. Everything he did was against Yahuwah. Everything he did was, he believed that he was serving Yahuwah, but at the end he was doing something totally different. So by studying his life, it's an example that Yahuwah set for all of us, and how what if we want to lose our crown, and for sure we don't want to do it, we need to follow the step of Saul. So, and we want to avoid losing our crown. We need to avoid everything that Saul did. We need to follow the example of David. So I think that's an amazing example for all of us on how to avoid losing our crown.
Well, continuing on a little bit in 2 Samuel, we have also the interesting exchange of when Hanan took, in verse 4, Hanan took David's servants and shaved off the one half of their beards and cut off their garments in the middle and sent them away in shame. It's so interesting to me that the culture of honor and the culture of manliness and honor and not being shamed, was part of it was tied to facial hair, right? How interesting that they shaved half the beard. I really do wonder maybe what the metaphorical meaning of only half of the face being shaved. Like what? I mean, we know that in our modern Western world, it is widely, condoned and accepted to have clean-shaven faces. We also have, in the Greek context, the Greek world, they were very pro clean-shaven face. Even in the Egyptian context, they shaved like every hair off of their body, and they would wear like little fake beards. But we see in the scriptures, the manly men of Elohim, they all seem to have this consistent pattern, which was they had, facial hair, they had beards, they just let it grow. And so I don't know if like you have any insight to this, the half the beard. Why is it half the beard, do you think, Juan? I mean, it's just so strange.
Yeah, not really, Jake. It's been also, I've been wondering for a long period of time what it means. I think it's a matter of honor. And also this is an indication that it was common in the people of Israel, the men of Israel, to use the beard. We have some insights in the prophets that the Mashiach was using a beard. In the prophecies of when he was suffering, it is written like that. But what it means to shave half, I'm not so sure. But what's for me was interesting to notice is that they needed to remain in a cursed city. They needed to remain in Jericho. So just to think in this connection that it was a shameful thing to have a half of the beard shaved, that they were not permitted to go to Israel, to Jerusalem, but also they needed to stay in a cursed city. So, I'm still wondering, to be honest, I don't know what should be.
Yeah.
What's the meaning behind? But for sure, there is something between the lines that most probably we need to study more.
Somebody said here, the origin of the punk hairstyle, maybe. I don't know. Somebody else said, very interesting, like taking off and giving just one of their sandals. Is that a case? Is somebody giving like a sandal? Is that? I'm not super familiar with that. If there's a scripture discussing that,
There's
somebody
something in
said,
the book of Ruth about that, Jake. Is that
"Oh
they
yeah,
needed to remove the sandals when they didn't want to take the responsibility over the family of a brother, something like that. So
wow,
it was
okay."
a
So
shameful thing.
hold on, there are some
Uh-huh.
really good points that are coming out about this. Check this out.
Okay.
Somebody said half the virgins didn't keep oil in their lamps in
Ah.
the New Testament sense of those who meet the bridegroom. And
Mm.
so, oh man, that's a really interesting, could be a parallel between these scriptures again and the coming Mashiach. Uh, is how there was only half, and so the half of the virgins that didn't keep oil in their lamps, they had to go to buy oil, and they missed to go to the king. So I don't know if there's something we can draw out of that, but somebody made that
Most probably.
interesting point. Um,
I saw another comment. It says two faces like Janus, and that's an interesting one.
oh yeah, the
You
two-faced
know, it's
god of
idolatry.
month
Yeah,
of January. Yep.
yeah. It's like to be in one way and in the other way. Yeah, it's interesting comments.
Somebody said they had half their clothes cut away. So a commentary possibly on the garments, the wedding
Mhm.
garments not being. I don't know. Like there's some interesting things here. Taking their manliness, their authority. All right. Anyways, very interesting. I just wanted to talk about that for a moment because it did seem like a significant thing, teaching us one about the culture of honor in biblical
Yeah,
times, but also that perhaps some of those parallels do apply. Very interesting.
absolutely. And we're following this chapter, we see this amazing, again, talking about faithfulness, is that David was looking for the seed of Saul and Jonathan. And this is something we discussed here at home, Jake, and we have been talking about this for several days already. Is that when we want to put in practice the word of Yahuwah and to walking in this way, sometimes we have to decide, or we have two options. We can be in a passive way, passive mood, just waiting for Yahuwah to do things, or maybe we need to take an active role and do things for Yahuwah. And what I'm bringing this up because it's exactly what we see here in this chapter 9. He had a covenant with Jonathan. Actually, we want to read this in the chapter in 1 Samuel chapter 20. And in that covenant, David committed, he swore to Jonathan that he was going to take care of the seed after him. And David could have a very passive role in this way and just waiting for somebody appear and I'm going to respect this covenant. But he didn't do that. He was in an active role, looking and searching if there was somebody else from the seed of Jonathan in order to respect that covenant. And for me, that speaks a lot. What should be our attitude in this way? We can be in a passive mode. We can be waiting for Yahuwah to guide us, and I think we need to do it all the time. We should not, and we have been studying this in First and Second Samuel, that we need to also always consult with Yahuwah what we should do, should be our decisions, where to go, and so on. But that should be an active waiting in Yahuwah. It should not be a passive waiting in Yahuwah. And I think this is a beautiful example in David. He wanted to fulfill his oath. He wanted to do it. He wanted to act in righteousness. And he was not just waiting, sitting and waiting. He was actively looking how to live Torah, how to live the way of Yahuwah.
I think just him keeping his word with Jonathan is, like you were saying, it shows a lot about the character of the Messiah, and the kind of it reminds me of the parallel of the preservation of the remnant, right? You
Mhm.
have Mephibosheth, the one who's crippled in his feet, was the last of Saul's line that was allowed to survive, and so there's some beautiful parallels with chapter 9 and Mephibosheth being brought in and allowed to
Mhm.
eat at the king's table that
Mhm.
are parallel with the coming wedding banquet of the Lamb, right? And
That's absolutely right.
some beautiful things there. Maybe we could discuss that a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
Uh, so
There are a few passages and actually parables from Mashiach speaking about that. And that's why when I was saying before, we see the parallels, these prophetic parallels to what the Mashiach will do for all of us. Even in this morning, I was opening the scripture, and I landed in the book of Matthew, and it's talking and where it is describing about the multiplication of the food. And it's totally connected to this because, the beautiful thing that is written in the book of Matthew is that Yahushua was moved to compassion for the people. And it's exactly what we see in this chapter. It's not only David fulfilling his oath, his vow. He was doing it because he was moving into compassion, and that's why he was inviting, even that he was giving all the land back to Mephibosheth and his son. He was inviting him to be part of his family, to be dwelling with him, to partake of his food, to partake of his table. And that's starting from compassion in the same way that, we see Yahushua acting with all of us. Because of compassion, he came. Because of compassion, he gave his life. Because of compassion toward us, to his people, is that he's inviting us to be part of his house. And that's, for me, that's part of the amazing picture that we see here.
yeah, and even the aspect of him pretty much adopting him as one of the king's sons
Yeah.
is such a beautiful parallel with the redemptive aspect of believers in Yeshua being able to be fellow heirs, right?
Mm.
Talked about in Ephesians and in the New Testament, the whole concept of being adopted into the family of heaven to sit and eat at the king's table is what we're all gunning for, right? We want to sit at the feet of our master. We want to be able to be there at the wedding feast of the Lamb, and so it's just a beautiful aspect of the story of how he was pretty much adopted as one of the sons of David to then sit at his feet, and just very beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. And my wife made a point when we were reading this that I found it fascinating. And because it is written, I think a few chapters before, is that David was hating, his being was hating the lame and the blind when he was going to conquer the Jebusite city, Jerusalem. So we see here a situation that the Mephibosheth was lame. So everybody knew that David was not feeling well, and he was hating. His being was hating the lame and the blind. But in this case, he was acting with compassion and also being honoring the covenant. That even though that maybe he was hating in his being, the lame, he was accepting, as you said, Mephibosheth as his own son, living in his own house.
Wow.
So that was fantastic just to see when we read that David was a man after the heart of Yahuwah, and we connect these dots. We managed to really understand what compassion is. That even that we need to do something that is not totally something that we like, And it's also making alive what the Yahushua was speaking, that we need to deny ourselves. Denying ourselves is that to let him live through us. And we see it perfectly from my point of view here in this passage.
That's a like an amazing aspect that we could apply from the story is how to be merciful, how to swallow the pill. And I've always wondered, like, why was it David hated the blind and hated the lame? And that now I was even asking that question. I think when we were reading through those passages, is just kind of somebody who is so close to Elohim. Why is he looking down on these disabled? And is it the aspect of people being less than their full potential of being able to see and walk? Is it hating the state, or is it possibly hating the sins that are associated with those disablements? And I know there are prophetic ties to, for example, sandals and feet being related to messages and a messenger and sandals and the gospel can kind of correlate, because it's the sandals, the feet, that bring you to the places that you go. And I wonder about the parallel with some of these things. Somebody here in the chat had an interesting comment that said, perhaps the survivors of the day of Yahuwah could be those that are left of the house of Saul. So you have, perhaps the bride, perhaps those who are brought in, and then you have all the survivors after all the different judgments fall, are those who are brought at the end, after all the dust settles, after the Antichrist come against, and there's the survivors of the nation are brought from the ends of the earth, right? So that was an interesting comment I saw.
Yeah, it's beautiful, brother. And I agree with you. That was part of the discussion here at home as well, and has been my take from the long time. Is that the reason that David was hating or not liking this type of people with those disabilities is because of maybe what the disciples were asking to Yahushua when they saw lame people, is that sometimes it's connected to sin. Maybe it's connected also to generational curses. That maybe that was that David was looking at it. But the beautiful thing is that again, coming back to compassion, is that even though in this case, this Mephibosheth, he got lame because of an accident. He didn't came to this world like that. Was an accident. Maybe that was a kind of a differentiation that David understood. But even though that we can have a disability, Yahushua was speaking that the healthy people are not in need of a physician. When he was answering the Pharisees, the ones with sickness are in need of a physician. And he said that when he was speaking about getting to those peoples in darkness in order to bring the light of the truth of the kingdom of Yahweh. And so, at the end, Yahweh is looking into the heart if we really are righteous and we want to follow his way. And the beautiful thing when we see the full picture is that why do we think is that the Yahweh is talking about the resurrection and the transformation of our bodies? Because, even if we are in this life with a disability, or we are, with some corruption in our bodies, he is going to transform in order to be at the likeness of Yahushua HaMashiach in this new body. So that's why, we see even in that point, the compassion and the perfect plan of Yahuwah toward all of us, his people. And, regarding the food, there's so plenty of things to talk about that. I think it is written, Jake, I don't know if you can put it in the screen, what is written in the book of Luke, chapter 22.
Okay.
Verse 27 and 30.
Let's get this up for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Can you read it, brother, please?
For whether is greater, he that sitteth at meat, or he that serveth? Is not he that sitteth at meat? But I among you as he that serveth. Ye are which have continued with me in my temptations, and I appoint unto you a kingdom, as my Father hath appointed unto me, that ye may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and sit on thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel.
So that's amazing promise in the same way that David was doing with Mephibosheth. It's the same promise that he's giving us today. We are going to sit at that table. We are going to be part of his house. That's amazing. And when we do the parallel with what was happening in the temple and also in the tabernacle, there was a table, and the table they were putting the showbread, and was the showbread was given to the Kohanim, to the priest, in order to have something to eat, with all the offerings as well. So I think I see that parallel as well. That's part of the promise to all of us, that we are going to partake of his table, and that's so amazing. And I'm longing for that day, my friend.
Yeah. We have a comment here, and it says in Matthew 21:14, then the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. And so we saw, not only did King David and Samuel have a fixation on the blind and the lame, but we had the Mashiach had a fixation on the blind and the lame. And what he did was he changed their state. He healed them. And like you're talking about, the apostles were like, why are these people this way? Was it the sins of their fathers? Was it their sins?
Mhm.
And Yeshua goes, it is for the glory of Elohim. For this,
that's exactly right.
And so it's interesting that both David and the Mashiach both dealt with the lame and the blind, and it's mentioned in the scriptures revolving around them. And it's also it's just there's so much to this, and we know that in the case of Yeshua, in the circumstance, well, here's maybe a good point in relation to Mephibosheth, right? We have the lepers that were healed. We have those who were healed. Oftentimes, he told them, "Go and sin no more." He healed them of their ailments, but we oftentimes only had a few examples of those who were healed returning and thanking him for what he did for them. Like we have in the circumstance with the lepers, that they were healed. I think it was the 10 lepers. They were healed, and only one came back and thanked him after going to speak to the priests and showing them that they were clean. And so perhaps there's a parallel here with there were the many blind and lame. Sound like a Porky Pig there, blah blah blah. But we have then the one example of Mephibosheth that is then shown mercy and brought into the king's table. So anyways, I'm just kind of spitballing there. We have somebody here that had a comment, said, in my opinion, the survivor of the day of wrath of Yahuwah will be the people with the seal of Yahuwah in their forehead that are not part of the 144,000. So that's an interesting take on those who survive the day of Yahuwah and the all the things. So I just wanted to read that interesting comment there. Let's see here. Somebody saying, once we are home, we will all be healed. Hallelujah. Yeah. When the restored man comes about and Yeshua, gives us those glorified bodies, hopefully there will be no issues like that, right? So here we go. Somebody made an interesting comment and said, priests and Levites did not wear shoes when serving at the tabernacle or the temple. Did you know that one? That's really interesting.
No.
That is Shiron in the chat shared that. So if you have any further verses, maybe perhaps in the Torah that mentions that, or is it just a kind of a non-covered topic and we just are assuming they didn't have shoes? But it makes sense because it reflects Moses being told to take off his shoes. You're on holy ground, which very interesting. I never thought about that all those Levites and all those priests were walking around barefoot. It's a
And it's interesting, Jay, because maybe I remember we talked about this a long time ago here in Virtual House Church. Is that when we talk about electricity, our shoes serve as isolation. So in order not to let the electricity go through our bodies and get to the ground. So electricity, when you touch
rubber
a
boots.
wire, yeah, exactly, it goes directly to the air, to the ground. But if you have the shoes in yourself, you are protected somehow. You are not letting the electricity go through your heart, through your body. So without the shoes, basically you are the perfect conductor of electricity. So can you imagine? For me, it's been a fascinating thing when we talk about the Ark of the Covenant and all the glory of Yahuwah, the Kavod of Yahuwah. In the way that it's being written, you can think in electricity somehow. So can you imagine, the priests without their shoes over there, just to, I don't know, thinking in this way, just to let the presence of Yahuwah to fill them and going through them, connecting, even to the ground. That's an amazing way to think on this.
Here's another verse supporting the concept is Joshua 5:15. Then the commander of Yah's army said to Joshua, "Take your sandals off your foot, for the place where you stand is holy." And Joshua did so. So okay, so let's just throw this out there for everyone. Let's get excited about it because it's a cool thing to think about. In the millennial kingdom, when Mashiach comes back, right? We're all going to be walking around barefoot. We're going to be hanging out barefoot. So, oh man, get ready to stretch those toes in the grass, or walking on those, cobbled stones of the New Jerusalem or whatever. Oh man,
that would be fantastic. The same way that Adam and Eve were walking in the garden,
Oh wow. Somebody said here, thinking of it earthwise, when we get home, we take off our shoes as a sign of comfort and grounding, and we breathe easier. I'm at peace after a day's work. And somebody said, a lack of shoes in the temple reminds me of where you stand is holy ground, and then add in the perspective of the grounding and the priest standing in that Kodesh place. Yes, that's kind of what Juan was saying. It's like, it kind of makes me wonder. Hey, here's a thought. We read in last week's discussion, chapter 7 and 8, that discussed 6 and 7 discussed the priest that reached out and touched the ark as they were trying to move it, and people have theorized that it says that Yah struck him dead there, but could he have been killed by some type of electrical discharge from the Ark of the Covenant? And in that circumstance, it makes me wonder, since they were transporting it, did he have shoes on? I don't know.
Oh, that's a good question. Wow.
maybe if he had touched it and he did, well, I mean, I don't want to read into it too much, but we're talking about grounding here, and perhaps if one of the reasons he died was, some kind of a electric discharge from the ark from the Most High, then just interesting thought there. Somebody says my guess would be no shoes for carrying the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah, probably so. If they're if they're priests, they're probably doing as they're supposed to.
Most probably, and maybe the only fact that they need is to be carried on by the priest and not in a kind of vehicle. That makes also an additional thing that the priest needed to be prepared with maybe the things that we're eating, maybe the clothes, and we discussed this about linen as well. What is the implication in terms of electricity and on? And now if we think that maybe they were without shoes, makes total sense.
Yeah, somebody corrected me. I misspoke that they were carrying the ark. They actually were commanded to only carry the ark on the shoulders of priests, but in this circumstance, they had it on a cart. They were moving it in a wooden vehicle there, so that's kind of what happened. Somebody, Iris mentioned, is shoes mentioned in the armor of Yah? that's an interesting thought. Let me look up.
Talks about the feet, but I don't remember about shoes.
All right, so the armor of God in Ephesians, it says the belt, the breastplate, the footwear, the shield, the helmet, and the sword. So, breastplate of righteousness, shoed with the preparation of the gospel of peace, which is what brought us to this conversation, because we're talking about Mephibosheth, who had lame feet, and I wondered if there was a parallel with the feet and transferring messages and sandals and stuff is all tied to sharing a messenger's message, right? And so it's actually in Ephesians, it talks about shoes, wearing shoes in the preparation of the gospel of peace. So perhaps there is included in the armor of the Spirit contained in the book of Ephesians, the shoes of the gospel of preparedness to share the truth of Elohim, right? Is because you're going out and you're going to the nations, you're going to battle, right? And that's different than being at home in the holy place, like in the place, of I don't know. I'm just kind of differentiating here between the priest who didn't have shoes and the Spirit of the Lord, who in Ephesians says they have this, the symbolic gospel preparedness sandals.
Actually, it's connected to what you just read before, Tejek, with Joshua. Joshua commanded the army to take off the shoes because they were in a college place. But it was all in that place. Yeah. After that, they were wearing the shoes because they needed to go to the army. So, just make a total sense to what you said.
Somebody says there's some connection here with also fulfilling the scripture that the serpent would bruise his heel, but he would crush the serpent's head. So there's an interesting tie-in there with, oh, interesting. Oh, wow. So, a serpent can only bite somebody's heel if they're not wearing a shoe. And we have the Antichrist setting himself up in the Holy of Holies, proclaiming himself as Elohim. So I don't know that I don't know if I'm stretching here, but
it's an interesting thought. It's an interesting thought. And actually, I have always been thinking is that since Jews are somehow connected to the good news of peace, is is somehow what you said, Jake. We are commanded by the Mashiach to go into the world, to bring the good news to the world. So if we are coming to the world without the good news in our feet, somehow it could be connected to what you said. We are going to be unprotected.
Yeah.
Unprotected to the fight,
We had one last quote here. Somebody said, Isaiah 52:7, how beautiful are the feet of them that bring the gospel of peace. Awesome. Well, Juan, that's kind of all I had for this week's 2 Samuel portion. Are there any other thoughts you had?
No, I think that's from my side, Jake. Chapter 10, I think it is also, as I said at the very beginning, is a prophetic picture of Mashiach, in this case, David, fighting with Syria and defeating them. I think, after the millennial kingdom of Mashiach, we know that Satan will try to gather all the nations back then and try to conquer Jerusalem. And that's going to be the final destruction. I see that parallel here. And I'm mentioning this is that, as I said before, when we see the news and we see what's happening in the world today, sometimes that can make anybody discouraged of what's happening. But when we see these things here, in this chapter with the promise of Yahuwah, how he was helping David, how he was helping even, the army of Israel when we're the less people than the enemy. and the enemy was fleeing away because they were not able to conquer Israel. It wasn't the other way around. It was the strength of Yahuwah helping them. Is something that we need to remember every day, is that no matter that the world is falling away, if we believe in the promises and the compassion of Yahuwah, he will be beside us in the same way that we see happening here. Is in our day-to-day, is in our life, and also what's coming by the hand of Yahushua HaMashiach. That's the only thing that I can comment, Jake. Just to finish, it's been a blessing to be here with you, my brother. I was missing to be part of a Virtual House Church. So we'll see you again next week, I guess, right?
Yes, it was so good to see you, Juan. And this week, everybody, we're not going to have trivia, but we have several weeks that we haven't had it. So I'm going to have a lot of questions for next time. So get ready, do your homework over these 2 Samuel portions that we've studied the past few weeks. And we're going to have some really hard questions and a cool prize for next week. So try to tune in live. And 2 p.m. CST is when we do this. And Juan, are you able to play the blessing song on your end?
Yeah, I think so. Let me check. For sure,
While
I
you
have
get
it here.
that set up, I'll play one other song from my sister-in-law. It's I haven't played it for a few weeks. It's "Then Shall the Virgin Rejoice." So it's a pretty short song, and then we'll play the blessing song, and we'll wrap up. Does that sound all right?
Absolutely. Yep.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning into the Virtual House Church, and here's some cool music to wrap us up with. And until next time, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It was great to talk with you, Juan. It's great to be part of this Virtual House Church family. So,
thank you, brother. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Then shall the virgin rejoice in the dance, both young men and old men together. Lie, 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 lie. For I will turn their mourning into joy, and I will comfort them, and they shall rejoice, rejoice, rejoice from their sorrows, and they shall rejoice, rejoice, rejoice from their sorrows. Then shall the virgin rejoice in the dance, both young men and old men together. Lie, 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 lie,
יברכך יחוה וישמרך, יאר יחוה פניו לך וחונקה, יישא יחוה פניו לך ויעשה לך שלום. יישא יחוה פניו לך ויעשה לך שלום, ויעשה לך שלום, ויעשה לך שלום.
Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yahweh lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Yahuwah make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yahuwah lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace.
Yahuwah te bendiga y te guarde. Yahuwah haga resplandecer su rostro en ti